Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Stoner Report. I'm Marius Stoner, Associate Editor of Cannabis Culture Magazine. I'm here at the BCMP Vapor Lounge at 307 West Hastings. And we got a crowd in here already today, so it's fairly busy. It's a beautiful day here in Vancouver. It's slightly clouded over, but that means that it's not too hot. So it's still sunny, but there's a breeze, so we're pretty happy at that. And as you probably heard, we're all very, very excited because Mark Emery's sentence is over. It was over last week on the 9th. And we still don't know exactly when he's coming home. He's being held at a for-profit prison right now in Virginia, I believe. And we don't know how long it's going to be, and we're all kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. But at least part of it's over. There's also some exciting news, as you probably read or may have heard if you're Canadian, that Jodie is planning to run for the Liberal Party. So we're starting up with a sign-up drive. If you'll check our Facebook page and our front page, you can see how to become a Liberal. I think it costs $20. I joined. I'm a Liberal. I paid my $20. And hopefully Justin Trudeau and the rest of his party will follow through on their promise. But if we can get enough people to sign up as Liberal on that site, then it'll be obvious to the Liberals that this is a big enough issue for them to be able to win the next federal election with. So I encourage you, if you're Canadian, to find out how you can join the Liberal Party, and if you can, please do so with that site. And I'll get the name of the site by the end of the show for you. So let's start off today. Where's my camera here? Talking about that very issue. Jodie Emery creates a problem for the Conservatives. Jodie Emery, the wife of marijuana activist and seed dealer Mark Emery, has declared her intention to run for a Liberal nomination in the NDP stronghold of Vancouver East. Emery's husband, you will recall, was arrested in Nova Scotia in 2005 at the behest of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA's boss immediately called the arrest a significant blow not only to the marijuana trafficking trade, but also to the marijuana legalization movement. Not one of history's happier forecasts, you'd have to say. Mr. Emery, convicted of mailing contraband seeds to American buyers, served 5 years in American prisons before being released last week. Canada's Conservative government had not only Shanghaied Emery and extradited him for a crime practically deemed beneath notice by the Canadian police, they intervened against a plea bargain he made with American prosecutors that would have allowed him to serve part of his sentence here. Now that he is free, he plans a tour of Canada in support of the Liberal Party. It is a less rude version of what I would do in his place. Jodie Emery stood by her husband during his American sojourn and served as his spokesperson. It's not surprising to find the Conservatives snickering at her proposed Liberal candidacy. It is a little surprising to find politically independent academics and pundits getting derisive about it, emphasizing the problems she would supposedly create for the Liberals. Are we really so sure she can create none for the Conservatives? The Canada Revenue Agency was happy to cash enormous tax checks from the Emery seed business until the DEA waggled a finger. It is thus hard to see how Mark Emery's arrest was morally distinguishable from kidnapping. One might even say it was a kidnapping mail-ordered from our Conservative government, in much the same manner as Emery's seed. The people who applauded the arrest are those who ordinarily talk the loudest of Canadian sovereignty. Are they even slightly embarrassed that the U.S. federal government changed its policy while Mark Emery was still bunged up and now suffers pot to be sold openly in industrial quantities in 2 U.S. states? I would ask on what principle this man was condemned, but even some mere excuse beyond sadistic frivolity would be nice. Yeah, that was a good article from Colby Kosh from Maclean's. Poll showing that most Canadians want pot laws relaxed, kept secret by the Harper government. A strong majority of Canadians think the federal government should either legalize marijuana or decriminalize the possession of small amounts, according to a new Department of Justice poll obtained by Torstar News Service. The poll, kept secret by the Conservatives for months, found 70% of respondents believe pot laws should be loosened. Of the 3,000 respondents, 37.3% said the government should legalize marijuana, while 33.4% said the possession of small amounts should be decriminalized. Only 13.7% of respondents supported the status quo, while 12% said they believed Ottawa should impose harsher penalties. The Conservatives have made Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's pro-legalization stance a cornerstone of their recent attack ads, suggesting legalizing marijuana would make it the drug more accessible to children. But the poll numbers suggest more Canadians support Trudeau's stance on marijuana, or the New Democratic leader's Thomas Mulcair's support for decriminalization, than leaving the laws as is. The Department of Justice commissioned the 175,000 Ipsos Reis poll after the Supreme Court's Bedford decision in December, which struck down certain prosecution laws as unconstitutional. The telephone poll focused almost exclusively on opinions on marijuana laws and prostitution, as did additional focus groups conducted by the pollster in 7 cities. Mike Boyer of Spokane, Washington, man fired for buying legal pot, is then rehired. The 30-year-old was featured on the local news after he camped out Monday night to be the first person to buy legal weed in the eastern Washington city. He was fired after his employer thought he was high on the job. But after his story went viral and it was learned he wasn't working, Boyer was rehired Thursday and basking in the glow Friday. I was really excited, he told the news. He puts the high in rehired. The Spokane, Washington man, who caused a buzz in national media after he was canned from his job for smoking legal pot Tuesday, has been brought back by the temp agency that originally fired him. The bizarre ordeal of Mike Boyer, 30, has come full circle after he waited in line some 20 hours to be the first person in the eastern Washington city to buy legal weed. Thanks, Jeremiah. At Spokane Greenleaf. He happily posed for cameras and did interviews in his sunglasses and tie-dyed shirts as he claimed the title of #1 pot buyer in Spokane. But Labor Ready, a true blue temporary employment company, ordered Boyer in for a drug test after seeing him smoke some bud Tuesday. One of the local news stations, KREM-TV, followed Boyer home to watch him take his first few hits. Boyer had taken the day off, but the company was under the impression he had been working that day. True Blue spokesman Stacey Burke told the Daily News. Entrepreneurs abuzz over Washington's legalized marijuana. When he decided to open a marijuana store, the first challenge Tom Beckley faced was getting kicked out of the house by his girlfriend. "I've been sleeping in my truck," he says. But Mr. Beckley, whose top-shelf cannabis in Bellingham, Washington, became one of the first retail stores to open last week after Washington legalized the sale of marijuana, doesn't seem perturbed. In fact, he looks relaxed and is optimistic. After all, his store had a lineup around the corner on Tuesday when it opened to sell greenery, bagged with such names as Cheesequake and Catatonic, which sell for about $75 US for a 3.5 gram bag, otherwise known as an eighth. In Washington, as with Colorado, the seeds of a new industry have been planted by citizens who voted to end the prohibition on weed. Beyond the jubilation of activists and smokers, though, are risk takers such as Mr. Beckley, who face unpredictability, complicated regulations, rigorous background checks, and suppliers who are struggling to get licensed and grow their product. It must be meticulously barcoded, tested in a third-party lab for THC levels, and quarantined before it is sold to the public with tobacco-like warnings. These entrepreneurs see themselves as the vanguard of a new billion-dollar industry. It's going to be bigger than anyone's imagined, says Mr. Beckley, who used to work as an electrical inspector for the city of Bellingham. Seattle's first legal marijuana shop ran out of weed in 3 days. Cannabis City opened on Tuesday, ran out of weed by closing time Thursday. Seattle's first and only recreational marijuana store had to close on Friday after running out of stock in just 3 days since Washington became the second U.S. state to allow pot sales to adults. Cannabis City opened in Seattle on Tuesday with at least 4.5 kilograms of marijuana for sale, and by close of business Thursday, it was all gone. A message on the store's phone line said it would reopen on July 21st. There were widespread concerns that the shortages of pot would afflict retailers this week after the state issued its first 25 licenses to outlets under a heavily regulated and taxed system approved by voters in November 2012. Some business owners plan to limit the amount of marijuana early customers could buy to try to make stocks last. Amber McGowan, manager at Cannabis City, told Reuters on Thursday the store would likely not have enough inventory to stay open for all of its regularly scheduled business hours until a delivery that was due next week. Washington State says marijuana brownies are okay, but no lollipops. Marijuana stores in Washington State can sell marijuana in cookies, brownies, and other approved baked goods, but cannot put the drug in candies, lollipops, or food items that might appeal to children, according to newly released rules. Yes, that's because obviously cookies, brownies, and other approved baked goods do not appeal to children at all. Anyways, Washington became the second U.S. state to allow recreational sales of marijuana to adults on July 8th when its first retail stores opened under a heavily regulated and taxed system approved by voters in 2012. The state's Liquor Control Board, which regulates the fledgling sector, published the guidelines on Wednesday for the packaging and labeling of marijuana edibles. It prohibited any products, labels, or packaging designed to be especially appealing to children, including lollipops and suckers, gummy candy, and jelly beans. To gain approval to market a pot-laced food item, such as brownies or bottled drinks, a processor must submit a photo of the product along with its labels and packaging. Puff, pinkslipped legal weed use still carries job risk. You're not being paranoid. Even in Washington and Colorado, smoking a legal joint after work could still get an employee fired. The whirlwind firing turned rehiring of a tie-dye bedecked marijuana buyer in Spokane last week, followed by an admission Friday by Seattle's city attorney that he took pot to work, only clouded chronic confusion among many workers in the two pot-friendly states who ask if their legal weed rights trump an employer's cannabis policies. The answer for now remains utterly non-hazy no. Workers still can be booted, or never hired in the first place, for puffing cannabis if anti-pot rules exist in their employers' HR handbooks. So, if adults in Colorado and Washington legally consume weed after work, away from the job site or the office, they must remain mindful of the drug rules at the shops and offices where they ply their trades, according to labor law experts in both states. Employers do hold all the cards. You're not guaranteed a job. If not using marijuana is in the contract or in the terms of the job, you can get fired, said David Rhines, CEO of the Seattle-based Marijuana Business Association, considered the cannabis industry's Chamber of Commerce. DC decriminalization marijuana. DC decriminalizes marijuana despite Congress's attempts to block the new law. Now, the nation's capital will treat possession of the herb like a parking ticket with a fee. When the clock struck midnight on Thursday morning, Washington, D.C. joined 17 U.S. states in decriminalizing cannabis. In response to the needlessly harsh penalties, it's 2:20, so somewhere it's 4:20. Somewhere it's 4:20 a.m. as well, so happy 4:20 and happy 2:20. Just be happy and puff a joint if you got one. I have one. Jeremiah rolled one for me. That was very nice of him.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, he forgot about it, so he didn't actually roll it for me.
Well, I rolled it for you too.
He rolled it for both of us. There you go.
Yeah.
Here, come back and take your joint.
It was intended to smoke with you on your show.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm not doing the show today, by the way.
You're not doing your show?
No, I rescheduled the guest till next week. Washington State show next week.
Okay.
With interviews.
All right, so I don't know if you caught that, but there will be no 4 o'clock show today. I heard it from the horse's mouth there, and Jeremiah just told me too. So, so yeah, no, he's not going to do a show today, but it's going to be the Washington State show next week because he had to reschedule a bunch of guests. So, yes, and he had shit to do today, so he had to move the show. So, there's lots to do. Quote unquote. Anything else? No, I'm just being a snarky bastard. And if you don't know that I'm a snarky bastard by now, now you do. So happy 220, happy 420, happy 320 even, I'm sure it's 320 somewhere. And happy whatever 50 it is in Newfoundland. Okay. Back to work. Here, somebody take this joint. When this clock struck midnight on Thursday morning, Washington, D.C. joined the 17 U.S. states in decriminalizing cannabis. In response to the needlessly harsh penalties and consistently racist enforcement of criminalization, the District of Columbia Council voted on this common-sense measure 10-1, and Mayor Vincent C. Gray signed it into law in March. Thursday marks the end of a 60-day congressional review period, at which point the law goes into effect. Marijuana possession will now be treated more like a parking infraction than a criminal act within the nation's capital. The change is a dramatic one for Washington. Previously, simple cannabis possession could be life-altering. The punishment ranged from 6 months in jail and a $1,000 charge. Now, possession of up to an ounce will carry no criminal charge and will result in a $25 ticket or warning. public use of cannabis can still be treated as a crime with harsh penalties attached. Federal officers, such as the Capitol Police or U.S. Park Police, can still arrest people for marijuana possession under federal law, as opposed to city law, a detail that exposes the growing rift between federal and local policies on cannabis. However, city police officers, carry out the vast majority of marijuana arrests, now marijuana ticketings, in D.C. The new law is great progress in mitigating the damage done by criminalization. An ACLU study found that African Americans in Washington, D.C. were 8 times as likely to be arrested as whites, despite comparable usage rates. The same study found that the city spent over $26.5 million annually on enforcing marijuana laws. That's quite a cost to enforce a policy that profits gangs, has not been shown to reduce drug use or potency, keeps a medicinal plant away from people who could benefit from it, and that, unlike alcohol, has never directly killed someone in recorded history. While Washington's cannabis laws are still far from perfect, they are vastly improved as a result of this measure going into effect. The House votes to let banks take deposits from marijuana businesses. In an historic vote Wednesday, the U.S. House has approved an amendment to the Treasury Department appropriations bill barring the agency from spending any money to punish financial institutions that provide services to marijuana businesses in states where it is legal. The amendment was sponsored by Reps. Heck, Perlmutter, Lee, and Rohrabacher. It passed with bipartisan support. This is the second time in less than 2 months that the House has voted to roll back marijuana law enforcement. In May, the House passed an amendment prohibiting the Drug Enforcement Agency from undermining state medical marijuana laws and passed 2 amendments prohibiting the DEA from interfering with state hemp laws. Congress is yet again rejecting the failed war on marijuana, said Bill Piper, Director of National Affairs for the Drug Policy Alliance. They have read the poll numbers and are doing both what is right and what is politically smart. The 2014 National Drug Control Strategy, baby steps in the right direction. The White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Drug Czar's office, released its 2014 National Drug Control Strategy Wednesday. While in general, it is remarkable for its similarities to drug control strategies going back more than a decade, it does include some signals suggesting that the Obama administration is ready for a shift in emphasis in the drug war, from a criminal justice approach to a more public health-oriented approach. But even that rhetorical positioning is somewhat undercut by the strategy's continuing commitment to the criminalization of drug users and the people who supply them, as well as particular policy prescriptions, such as its support for the expansion of drug courts, the use of criminal justice system to enforce therapeutic health goals like abstinence from drug use, as opposed to measures that don't involve the criminal justice intervention. The 2014 strategy also continues the roughly 3-to-2 funding ratio between law enforcement and treatment and prevention spending that has marked federal anti-drug spending since at least the Clinton administration in the 1990s. And it does so somewhat deceptively. In support of this strategy, ONDCP wrote in a press release, "The President has requested $25.5 billion in fiscal year 2015. Federal funding for public health programs that address substance use has increased every year, and the portion of the nation's drug budget spent on drug treatment and prevention efforts, 43%, has grown to its highest level in over 12 years. The $10.9 billion request for treatment and prevention is now nearly 20% higher than the $9.2 billion requested for federally funded domestic drug law enforcement and incarceration. What the press release doesn't mention when claiming that treatment and prevention spending now exceeds spending on law enforcement is that it does not include figures for drug interdiction and international spending on law enforcement side of the ledger. The White House's proposed federal drug budget for 2015, however, shows that those drug prohibition enforcement costs add up to another $5.4 billion, or $14.6 billion for enforcing drug prohibition versus $10.9 billion for treatment and prevention. What a waste. And our last story for the week is how legalizing pot would help national security and reduce border instability. Okay, see you guys. Yeah, I'm almost done. Last story. How legalizing pot would help national security and reduce border instability. It should be our top national security objective and could help disarm Central American drug cartels. The national security goals of our country have been implemented in recent years by waging 2-decade-long insurgent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, nation building in those countries, and increased surveillance in our cities. While 3,459 U.S. soldiers have died in the ongoing Afghanistan war, a total of 4,804 soldiers have given their lives in Iraq. Both wars have totaled 1 million injured soldiers, according to Forbes, including traumatic brain injuries and PTSD that led directly to the recent VA crisis. With the latest chaos in Iraq, and potentially in the near future in Afghanistan, the flood of border children fleeing cartels and political mayhem, and the over $4 trillion borrowed for wars occupying foreign lands, it's time we reevaluate our national security objectives. According to the White House's June 2011 U.S. National Strategy for Counterterrorism, keeping the nation safe from terrorists is the top priority. As the President affirmed in his 2010 National Security Strategy, he bears no greater responsibility than ensuring the safety and security of the American people. This national strategy for counterterrorism sets out our approach to one of the President's top national security priorities: disrupting, dismantling, and eventually defeating Al-Qaeda with its affiliates and adherents to ensure the security of our citizens and interests. First, Afghanistan, according to CBS News, is the world's largest supplier of cannabis, and the plant is even more profitable to Afghan farmers than opium poppy. Considering that the U.S. is the largest consumer of marijuana in the world with 7.3% of Americans, around 23 million citizens who regularly use marijuana, the Afghan economy and people could benefit greatly from supplying a legal cannabis industry. And that's the news for this week. I'm just going to go to the front page, check out the story. Okay, yeah, if you go to our front page and click the join now, you can, you can join for a year for $10 or 2 years for $20. That's what I joined. Should be enough for the election. That you can join the Liberals, but say you're joining because you want them to legalize marijuana, which is what we want them to do. Don't forget that Jeremiah's not going to do a show today, but stay tuned for our other shows. I'll come Al the Alchemist class in session is going to be Tuesday at 11, as usual, on Be Real, as well as Pot TV. Wednesday from Under the Influence, good old Marijuana Man, and with Jeremiah and yours truly, and the Kush Queen, and also Al the Alchemist. Thursday is usually when Jodie tapes her show. She actually taped a show yesterday. I know she hasn't done one for a long time, so it should be up soon if it isn't up already. And my show will be on Fridays at 2, and Jeremiah's show at 4 when it'll be next week, not this week. So, Saturdays. Don't forget to tune in Saturdays for Red Beer's Glass show, which I think is at 4. Maybe at 7, but I think it's 4. Anyways. So, also don't forget, cannabis is the most advanced plant on the planet, and we're going to use it to save the world and save ourselves. So hang in there, everybody. We're looking forward to Mark Emery's return. And until next week, I'm Marius Stoner for Cannabis Culture. Take care.